So the question we are asking today is, are you cursed, or is it the family unconscious? If you don't already know that families have a shared structure in consciousness with its own laws and own dynamics, it might be taking you by surprise that your individual life experience connects to more than just what you're ready to see on the surface. We all carry psychological and behavioral patterns that come essentially from our placement in our family and how functional or how dysfunctional our families were that we grew up in. Before we get into explaining and understanding the family consciousness, I want you to know that any system or any understanding you already have might be 100% valid on its own level. We are just introducing something additional beside them that is going to make everything make even more sense. So let's start from this idea of family consciousness. So where is the family consciousness, or what is the family consciousness? It's the easiest to put into context if we approach it from the direction of research in psychology and psychiatry. The first concepts that come to mind come from Freud and Jung. So if you think about Freud, he represented the pioneering of the personal unconscious, the understanding that early memories can be repressed into some repository of memories and experience that for some reason is difficult for the person to remember because it causes some sort of cognitive dissonance with the person's day-to-day life, or it doesn't align with family or societal or day-to-day values of a person. The other name that comes to mind when thinking about unconscious or the unconscious is Carl Jung. And Jung has gone farther in his work than Freud did. He recognized that there is a collective structure of unconscious symbology, imagery, access to archetypes and inner wisdom and information that is available to all of us. That we have our shared symbols, that we have our shared understanding, that we have shared inner connections to certain types of characters that he called archetypes, that can be an immense source of inner wisdom. And that's what he called the collective unconscious. If you imagine Freud's and Jung's work as an iceberg and say most of that iceberg is beneath the level of the sea, right? Then you have the conscious on the top, the tip of the iceberg that is hanging out of the water. You have the personal unconscious that Freud discovered, where the subconscious right on the edge of the water is where we repress memories, but we are able to retrieve them. The unconscious is where we repress to the extent that we cannot retrieve them, or we don't even have the slightest idea what's in there. The bottom, the absolute bottom of the iceberg is the collective unconscious that Carl Jung discovered. When we talk about the family unconscious, the shared family consciousness, we are talking about a layer of consciousness somewhere in between the collective and the personal unconscious. So the family unconscious, from this perspective, is a structure that you are not consciously aware of, but a structure to which you are deeply connected to. This intermediary structure of consciousness was discovered by German psychotherapist and psychiatrist Bert Hellinger. According to Hellinger, every single person's consciousness is deeply connected to the family spirit or the family consciousness of the biological blood-related family that they were born into. Whether or not anyone has a physical relationship with that family, or they were left in a hospital as a baby, from this perspective, from the perspective of the family unconscious, it doesn't matter. Whoever your birth family is, whoever the people are who gave you this opportunity to live, you are going to belong those people on the level of the family consciousness. According to Hellinger's research as well, everyone prioritizes belonging to their family structure in the family unconscious over individual well-being, individual success, staying alive, and making any kinds of plans happen. So it seems there is a depth in consciousness that is more important to an aspect of us than our own life or our own success or our own well-being. Every structure that exists in nature or in society has its own laws of functioning. I'm not thinking about the human laws, which is like, please don't shoot people or we might put you in jail. I'm talking about the more natural laws, the laws of the structure, what makes the structure function, what breaks the structure, what makes it dysfunctional, what are the things that happen when someone is not living up to those laws. The family unconscious or the family consciousness has laws like that as well. And those laws apply whatever happens, just like gravity applies whatever happens if you are on the earth, right? There is no such thing as defying gravity. Even if you want to fly, you have to build your airplane with gravity in mind. What are these laws of family unconscious? We have 4 fundamental laws of the family unconscious that you absolutely have to know about. And all of the dynamics and much of the repetitive patterns that we experience in our day-to-day lives, and much of the difficulty that we are experiencing when trying to break out of those repetitive patterns comes from the interaction of these 4 basic laws in the family structure. The first is the law of belonging. So the law of belonging is very simple, but it expands in a kind of curious way. So first of all, the law of belonging states that every single person who has ever been conceived into a family, whether born or unborn, belongs to the family. Everyone has the right to belong to the family as they are. Nobody can be excluded. Nobody can be disowned. Nobody's experience can be lied about. Where it becomes interesting is there are certain people outside of the family structure who join or become part of the family structure. One of this is the people who make place for others. So the people who, through dying or having very serious misfortune, let's say a fiancé is broken up with right before marriage, someone gets left at the altar. The person who left that fiancé at the altar marries another person and they have children. The pain of the first person who is getting left at the altar is actually the price that it took for the new family to emerge. So if that person wasn't left at the altar, if that person didn't go through that difficult separation, the person who left him wouldn't have met a new spouse. So in that sense, the person who was left at the altar becomes part of the family because their pain and suffering was required for the children with the other person to be born. The other example of people from the outside joining the family is through perpetrator and victim dynamics. Perpetrator and victim dynamics are very, very common, especially when we look back at a history of wars and abuse and violence. Whether it's the death of someone or whether it's something different like abuse or someone gets crippled for life, perpetrator and victim dynamics have this very specific aspect about them, which is you cannot victimize or hurt other people. When someone takes the life, let's say someone murders another person, the victim from that murder actually becomes part of the perpetrator's family. And you are going to see a bit later on why it's so important. The victim from the murder becomes part of the perpetrator's family. In the victim's family, the perpetrator becomes part of their family. So when you establish a perpetrator-victim dynamic, either through being someone's victim or either through being someone's perpetrator, you both become part of the two families. Why is it so important to talk about these horrible things and explain how these things happen? Later on, you are going to see how the dynamics play out. But let's go to the second law. So the second law is the law of rightful place. So the law of rightful place means that every single person has their own little piece, their own little place, exactly where they are born to, right in front of their parents in a generational ladder. So if you try to imagine yourself as part of the family, you imagine yourself as such. You stand as a person on your own. On your left side is your mother having her left hand on your left shoulder, and on your right side is your father having his right hand on your right shoulder, whether you are a man or a woman. And you are standing right there in front of them. That's the only place you can belong to. That's the only place you can be whole. Only from that exact father and only from that exact mother could you be born into this world. There is no such a thing that if my parents were different, or if my mother wasn't this woman but that woman, or if my father wasn't this person but that person, you, who you are, do not exist outside of this context at all. There is no such a thing as different parents or better parents for you. They might be dysfunctional, but the only parents you have, and you can have, are the people who are standing behind you in the structure of family consciousness. And the only place you can be whole is right in front of them. You are smaller than them. They will always be bigger. They will always be older. Even if your father dies at the age of 35 and now you're 45, your father will always be bigger than you. Your grandparents, your aunts and uncles, your great uncles, everyone who is blood related to your family and comes generations before you, they are all bigger than you, and you are only happy on your own little place. A similar law exists for siblings, but the sibling line stands right in front of the parents, and it starts from the right. So the oldest is always from the right, and then the second oldest, and then the third, and then the fourth, and then the fifth, depending on how big of a family you have. And every sibling has their own little place. If I am the second sibling, I cannot be the third. If I am the first sibling, I cannot be the second. If you just stop to think for a second, you can very quickly remember back to everyone who conceived into the family belongs to the family. If you think about that, and if you think about the law of place, you already understand how it might be a problem if, let's say, an aborted sibling or a child who died early is not recognized. So we had law number 1 and law number 2. So law number 1, the law of belonging. Everyone conceived into the family belongs there, has a right to belong there. Everyone blood related to the family. Everyone who makes decisions in situations that are life or death in the family, whether it's perpetrator-victim dynamics or broken relationships. The second law is the law of the rightful place, that everyone has a little place that is their own, right in front of their parents, in the right place in their sibling line, and that's the only place you can feel whole. That's the only place you feel you're enough. That's the only place where you can actually be balanced and happy. These are the first 2 laws. So what happens when these are broken? When these are broken, the third law comes into effect, which is the law of family conscience. Family conscience is a compensatory mechanism. Whenever someone's right to belong or the law of rightful place is disrespected, the family will try to compensate for the situation and point the issue out by taking someone from a later generation and have them represent the person who was disowned, or the person whose life was lied about, or the person who wasn't recognized as a member of the family. The family unconscious will show that issue through someone who is new to the family, a later generation, who is going to feel like, behave like, and generally exist as if they were the person who was disowned, whose pain was not recognized, whose life was ended. Whenever there is an opportunity to be in their rightful place, that new member of the family is going to be more pulled towards the the things that happened in the past into other people's conflicts, into other people's experience. This might be a little bit abstract to connect to for the first time. If you have any experience with someone being just, the black sheep in the family, you can be almost sure that they are carrying something that is not theirs from a different generation or from a story that is not theirs. It's very frequent to have, for example, the troubled child. There might be a grandma or a great aunt that says like, your sister is acting just like your Uncle Jim. And you know that Uncle Jim is a drunk and he ran away with a girlfriend that he got pregnant and then he ran away from her as well. And, there are these very difficult stories that can just roll on from generation to generation that the new members of the family can actually get stuck in. And this connection to the past stories keeps the patterns alive. And this connection to traumatizing stories from the past keeps the patterns alive. So we talked about 3 laws. We talked about the law of belonging, we talked about the law of rightful place, and we talked about the law of family conscience. The law of family conscience being when you pick up something difficult, when you pick up a difficult pattern or a heavy weight on your life that doesn't belong to you, because there was someone in the past whose story was so difficult that it got disowned or hidden from the family. And now the family unconscious is kind of saying like, hey, there is this person we forgot about, or there is this story we didn't tell the truth about. So how does this entire disowning process work? What do people disown from their family, or who do they disown? Usually it's shame, guilt, pain. It's the fact that sometimes things are so hard that you would not want to remember them. So you just push them down, you repress them, and you try to pretend as they didn't exist. A very good example for that is the loss of a loved one or a loss of a partner at a young age. So don't imagine necessarily malice behind these disowning. When you think about what are the things, what are the memories, what are the difficult fates that can be repressed in a person's life, think of these things. Something very difficult happens. Someone lost their fortune, lost their home, had to get themselves back up on their feet. There are these very difficult stories through which people pull themselves together through repressing the experience and just pretending the past didn't exist, instead of actually processing the pain or processing the loss or processing the issue with their family. These stories can be the background of behavioral patterns and ways of thinking and ways of orienting in the world generations down the line. Even long after the people who experienced it die, the family can still express compassion to that pain that nobody has even known about through acting, feeling, thinking, and all in all existing as if they were the ones going through that pain. So these were the 3 main laws. The 4th one is more about equal relationships. And as we go through more of these videos and more of this information about how these transgenerational trauma patterns work and how we can return them, how we can get liberated from them, and how we can find our individuality again beyond these generations of trauma that some of us might be connected to, you are going to understand a little bit more of this 4th law as well. But for now, it's just that in equal relationships, the law of equal give and take applies. Equal give and take means that I cannot grow over you. I cannot grow into a parent and child relationship, because if I do, the relationship is going to break down. So a healthy relationship works like, I love you, so I give you this. You love me, so you give me this. I love you, so I give you this, and then you love me, so you give me this. If I love you and decide to give you way too much, you might not be in the right place to give me back. And if I don't respectfully wait for you to return my energy slowly but surely, and I just give, then suddenly there is going to be a point where we have so much of a difference between what I sacrifice for the relationship and what you are ready to sacrifice, or what you are ready to give into and what I am ready to give into the relationship. You're going to leave. It's always the person who makes the less sacrifice who feels like a child who leaves an adult relationship. Whether it's friendship, whether it's romantic love, the person who is put into the position of feeling like a child is going to leave. The laws of the family unconscious are also called the orders of love by Bert Hellinger. And they are called the orders of love for a very, very good reason. Nobody is actually forcing you to keep this burden. Hellinger realized this gravitational pull, that this incredible willingness to self-sacrifice, it's something that is the soul's own through a natural compassion and love that we all have for our families. Whether or not we are physically connected to them, or whether we have good experiences with them, the day-to-day personality conflicts and what happens in your everyday life and the connection that you have with them in your everyday life is just the surface. But beneath the surface, in the unconscious, there is an absolutely immense amount of love and compassion and care towards the family that you emerge from. That innocent, limitless compassion and willingness to help and readiness for that little child to help the big people is what we all are beneath the surface, connecting to our own family's unconscious. This is what we are when you take away all the opinions and the experiences. There is this absolutely innocent, pure child in all of us who is just trying to help the big people or the family that he belongs to. And the other side of it is, this is exactly how our elders or our ancestors are. These people from whom we've gotten our lives, absolutely capable of carrying their own weights, who want absolutely nothing else from us than to live our lives in peace and happiness. And maybe the only thing they need from us is to show them appreciation, to show them respect, and to give their burdens back to them that we are carrying out of compassion. It's very important to know that anything we pick up from love. It's not a curse that someone has put on you. It's a weight that you picked up yourself, because we all have this selflessness towards our family. The good thing about working with the family unconscious, and the good thing about working with these patterns, is that you can actually make that unconscious love conscious, and you can leave your transgenerational trauma behind.